question was, if the body knows best, why are we predetermining, deciding how long to fast for? Doesn't it make more sense to just let the body fast until the body's done? And there's absolutely no question that would be ideal. The problem is, it's a little bit impractical for most people, right? Because you've got a business and you've got a business and you've got a business, and people have things they need to go do, and so most people can't take an indeterminate amount of time off. Most people need to book their flights. I mean, theoretically, you have to have a return flight to come into Costa Rica. There are other ways to do that, but the truth is, when I opened Tanglewood 22 and a half years ago, you could actually come any day you wanted, not Saturday. You could come any day. You could stay for any length of time. You could pay as you went. To be honest, I had no idea if I'd be able to get enough people to support myself, okay, at first. And so I wanted to make it really easy for people. What happened was, within about 2 years, we were so busy that I needed to know in advance when you're leaving so I could put the next person in. If we don't know when someone's leaving and we have all the rooms are full, I got to say to someone, yeah, we got space. I don't know when. I mean, how does that work? How do they book flights? How do they, unfortunately, it's just a little bit impractical. So the truth is, it would be ideal. But how many of you, if your body wanted to, would be able to go, take the time to spend 8, 9, 10 weeks of your life here? Anyone do that? Because the truth is that for most of you, it would be that long or longer. The average body can go at least 6 weeks. For most people, between 6 and 8 weeks. And some people are wealthy in nutrient reserves, right? If you're wealthy in nutrient reserves, you can go longer, okay? Adrian, you went 6 weeks last time. Could you have kept going?
Yeah.
Absolutely. There were still plenty of reserves. It would have been no problem, okay? I mean, it sounds crazy to most people. You can actually be okay 6 weeks without food, but you can't, or nutrients, but you can. Some of you may not have heard this before. My longest client fast was 18 and a half weeks, 4.5 months. Is anyone ready to just put everything on hold for 5 or 6 months, take however long it needs? Unfortunately, it's not really practical. So it would be ideal. And in the old days, people wrote, that's what they said, you should just fast until your body's done. To be honest, I'm not completely convinced that it makes the most sense for everyone. Okay? It would make complete sense if we lived like other species do. If we lived in nature and just made our living in the forest, what would we have to do? Not too much. I mean, it's about finding food. And if you're fasting, there's nothing you need to do. So you can go as long as you need to. But, again, it just doesn't really work so well for most people in the real world. And for most people, it would be months before you'd be done. 2.5 months, 9 weeks is a 6-week fast here. It's a 9-week process. That's more than 2 months. Not so many people could do that. So fortunately, and I started to say, I'm not even sure it's really ideal for everyone anyway, because although there'd be huge benefit to getting all the toxins out of your body, if you go, all that you could do in one fast. I don't believe anyone's ever going to completely cleanse with a single fast, no matter how long they go. You can't get to zero fat. And we store toxins not just in fat, but in muscle, in organs. So there's no guarantee you're ever going to completely cleanse no matter how long you go. But if you go until you've depleted all your reserves, you are going to be very, very skinny. You ever see the pictures and video of people leaving concentration camps, World War II? They're alive, but they don't have much body fat, right? 2% body fat is what your body needs to survive. That's pretty scary, okay? I mean, if you went till you had to stop, it would take you a long time to rebuild your strength. So if we lived in the forest and time meant nothing because there's nothing you needed to do, that'd be one thing. But most of you have lives you need to get back to. You got things you need to go do. It makes sense for someone to go that long if they have a strong reason to do that. So the guy who went 4.5 months had been diagnosed with stage 4 testicular cancer, and they told him he would be dead within a few months. There was nothing they could do, and so he wanted to go as long as possible. In fact, the original plan was for him to go 6 weeks, 42 days. At the end of 42 days, he said to me, I want to keep going, and I want your guidance, but I'm going to go one way or the other. With or without you, I'm going to keep fasting. And so I said, okay. And I continued to guide him through the process. We spoke every day. When we got to 4.5 months, I said to him, I think that's long enough. And he agreed to stop. They could find no trace of cancer. Now, your body kills cancer cells. I mean, only half the population is going to develop cancer. That's because the other half of us, our bodies are destroying those cancer cells as they form. Fasting allows your body to get ahead. So just in the last couple weeks, Gazelle put up a video with Aga. That was what, 2 weeks ago roughly? 3? Something like that, a couple weeks ago, with a client who came to us with a brain tumor. She was told it was going to continue to progress. It was going to grow. Or they don't know if it's malignant or not, but there's a brain tumor, and they're telling her, you need to do something. She did not want conventional medicine, because that hadn't worked out for anyone in her family. They'd all had conventional treatment and died anyway. So she came and fasted, and now it's been about 6 months since she was last diagnosed, and they said it's going to keep growing. Just had it tested, hasn't grown at all. Now, it hasn't gotten any smaller, but it hasn't grown, and that's a very positive sign. I just got a message 2 days ago from a woman that completed a Skype fast with me last week, and she didn't wait. I encouraged her to wait a couple weeks before going to get checked. She went right away, and her tumor is smaller. This is a woman with a breast tumor. Okay, it's smaller than it was a month ago, and that's what happens every time. Had she continued fasting, she did not fast long enough. Had she continued fasting, it might have disappeared. Okay, if she continues making the best choices, now that she's gotten a lot of the garbage out of her body and made her body much healthier, much more vibrant and vital, it can continue to shrink. And then if she fasts again, she can probably take herself completely out of danger, all right? So, while theoretically, yes, that makes sense, I think practically speaking, for a lot of reasons, it may not be in everyone's best interest. Now, what happens when you contact me, I had someone contact me this morning and say, I want to come fast for 2 weeks, and this is what I've got going on. And I wrote back and said, we'd be glad to guide you through the process. You're welcome here. And my strong recommendation is 5 weeks here, minimum, because they're dealing with a lower GI tract problem, ulcerative colitis. It's not going to heal in 2 weeks. It just doesn't happen. We've healed many people with ulcerative colitis, but it's a 5 or 6 week process. And keep in mind, medicine's telling him, never going to heal. You can take drugs for the rest of your life to try to moderate symptoms, but there is no way to cure this. Okay? His body can heal, but it's going to take longer than he wants to give it. And this is the thing, right? I mean, we want to be in touch with reality. Sometimes things take what they take. We can't speed that up. I mean, it's nothing we can do to, what we can do is we can do the best job possible to rest as completely as we can, sip enough water, right? Not get too much sun. Those things are going to take us away from getting the most benefit. So we're maximizing the benefit with the time we have. But we can't change the fact that if the body needs 4 weeks, it needs 4 weeks. It's not going to happen on our schedule. It's going to happen on the body's schedule. So,
let's say somebody does have surgery,
yep.
And then they learn about this whole process afterwards.
Yeah.
If they were then interested in doing a fast, about how long after a fast,
surgery? Yeah, there's no, they wouldn't have to wait. They could fast right after the surgery. I have people that do that. I mean, I have people that plan it that way. They decide they're going to get this thing done, whatever it is, and then they're going to fast immediately to heal afterward. We talked recently about, I think I mentioned to, maybe you weren't all here yet, but I recently learned that if you get residency in Costa Rica, you have to get vaccinated. I haven't been vaccinated in over 30 years. I have no interest in vaccines, but I'm not going to not complete my plans here because of that. I've got a lot invested here, time and energy and money. So if that's what if I can get out of it somehow, I will. But if I can't get out of it, I'll get the vaccines and I'll immediately fast afterward. If I had any kind of medical procedure, I would fast immediately afterward to allow for the most rapid healing possible. Okay?
Do you have any experiences with the people with MS?
Yep. The question is, do we have experience with people with MS? Not a lot. I fasted maybe somewhere between 12 and 15 people with MS. We've had great results with most of them. MS is challenging, and so not everyone with MS is going to respond very quickly, right away. But we've seen amazing things. A young man, Mexican descent, living in LA, who, when he was maybe 23, when I worked with him the first time, he's fasted with me a couple times. First time he was in a wheelchair. And it wasn't that he couldn't walk, it was that walking was very painful and difficult for him. And so he'd been in a wheelchair for a year and a half. After the fast, he was walking without a need for a wheelchair. Okay, there was another woman who, our last location in the US, have you seen the picture up there in the bookcase? There's a picture of our last location. It was a 3-story building. You walked in on the center level, you could walk down or up. There were only 2 rooms on the main floor. And we had a woman with MS who couldn't lift one of her legs, so she would walk dragging her right leg behind her. And when she was there, we had other people who needed to be on those 2 guest rooms on the main level more than she did. So she would walk up the stairs, she would step up with her left foot, and then she would use her hands to pick her right foot up and put it on the next step, because she couldn't pick it up without using her hands. She spent 6 weeks with us, and by the time she left, she was walking without needing her hands. She was lifting that leg by itself. Okay. We usually see amazing improvements with MS. There have been a couple where it hasn't been, we haven't seen as much improvement as we would have liked to. But in some cases, it just takes more than one fast. I had a young man fast with me via Skype years ago. He fasted with me via Skype because he didn't want to leave his house, ever, because he was incontinent. He couldn't hold his bowel movements or urine. And so he stayed home. And he would get himself, he could still walk, but he would run to the toilet. He never left his house. Maybe go in the backyard, but that was it. And by the time he was finished, he was much better, but it wasn't perfect yet. And I was like, hey, let's celebrate the improvements. And, understand, I told him in the beginning, it doesn't always happen with one fast. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 fasts with MS. He's never willing to fast again. He's tried everything else to no avail. I haven't heard from him now for a couple of years, but I used to hear from him every once in a while. I'd say, you got to fast again. That's what's going to do it. Anyway.
And have you ever fasted autistic people?
Not that I'm aware of. What I mean is, lots of people are on the spectrum. People who are mildly autistic, my guess is we've probably had quite a few of them. We've talked about this. This is for everyone's benefit. We've probably had quite a few of those people, but I don't really know for a fact. Actually, it's not true. It's not true. I did fast someone who was autistic. We didn't know it at the time. Mildly autistic. We didn't know it at the time. My godson. My godchild has autism. I fasted him when he was 2.5 years old. 5 days. But he only weighed 30 pounds. He was born with a heart defect. He had a leaking valve. He had open heart surgery to correct it By the time they were done, all of his valves leaked as a result of the surgery. So he had open heart surgery again to try to fix the problems they created. And so by the time he was 2.5, he'd already had open heart surgery twice. Had been on medications his entire life, including a diuretic, because leaking valves mean excess fluid. The first 5 months of his life, he had a feeding tube that went up his nose and down his throat. It was very uncomfortable. He was miserable all the time. He's a great kid, but he fasted. He was off the drugs for 6 months, didn't need them. And I'll tell you something interesting. When he went in for his next checkup, now his parents were concerned. They were afraid that if they told the doctor that they'd taken him off medication and fasted him, that the state would take the kid. And so they'd come to visit me at Tanglewood when we were still in the U.S. in that last location. When they got off the plane, so this has been years, I mean, he's now 18. He was 2.5 at the time. In fact, it was they arrived on July 4th, 18 or 19 years ago. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but he got off the plane and he was sick. Fever, sore throat, coughing, tons of mucus. And I said to his parents, we'd already talked about fasting him at some point. I said, this is what to do when you're sick, is to fast. This would be a perfect opportunity. And they agreed. And he could have gone longer, in fact. His parents couldn't go any longer. His parents were having, getting a little nervous, but he could have gone longer. I wouldn't normally, by the way, I wouldn't normally fast a child that young, not because there's anything wrong with fasting a child that young, but I didn't speak Dutch. He didn't speak English. I couldn't communicate with him directly. I didn't really know what was going on for him. And frankly, I wouldn't trust most parents. So I said to most parents, you need to take 100% responsibility. Most parents would say, sure. And then if anything happened, they'd sue your butt off, right? His parents are some of my closest friends in the world, and they are completely honest. And I knew I could trust that if anything happened, they would have taken responsibility for it. They would have said, this is our decision. It's not his fault. This is what we chose to do. But anyway, he went 5 days. He was off all medications. They told the doctor that when they arrived, one of their bags was lost. So I said to them, why don't you tell the doctor that the medication was in the bag that was lost? And by the time it showed up 5 days later, he was doing so well, you decided to leave him off the drug. That's what they told him. They didn't say anything about fasting. But in this checkup, the doctor said, well, that's fine. Said, he's pretty small for his age, which happens to vegan children. Vegan children grow more slowly. That's a positive thing, by the way. You want children to go slowly. The faster people grow and develop, for instance, little girls today, in undeveloped countries still start menstruating at 16 or so. In the US, I think the average is now 11, and there are girls as young as 5 menstruating. Okay, this is because they're eating diets that are too high in hormones and protein, other things perhaps. And girls that develop earlier have higher incidences of breast and ovarian cancer later in life. Okay, so you want to develop slowly. That's perfectly fine. There's no rush. He was a small kid, typical for a vegan kid, and the doctor said, what are you feeding him? And for whatever reason, they decided to tell him the truth. The truth was, he's only ever had breast milk when he was a baby, an infant, and then since then, fruit and salad. That's it. And the doctor freaked out. And he ordered every test he could think of, sure that he was going to have all kinds of issues as a result of this. And when the test results came back, he said, aside from the heart defect he was born with, this is the healthiest 2-year-old I've ever seen. Now, it was only later on. He was probably in 4th or 5th grade, and he was having trouble in school. And they went to get some tests to see what was going on, if there was some kind of learning disability, and found out that he was actually mildly autistic, as is his mother. I mean, his mother had been out in society functioning, had her own business, been married for years, and had no idea. But the doctor said there's usually a genetic component, and so they both got tested. Turns out she wasn't surprised. The last time I was in town, I didn't have time to get to their town when I was in Holland. I was in Amsterdam for an event, but I only had an extra day or so, and they lived a bit away, and I didn't have that much time. So Theo and Flynn came to visit me, and Ingrid didn't come because she was feeling a bit stressed, and when she's stressed, she needs to close the door and have her space by herself. That's typical for people who are autistic. So she said, I mean, she knows we've been very, very good friends now for 20 years. She said, I know you understand, but I can't leave the house today. So that's the only experience that I'm sure about with someone who's autistic, but I'm sure there have probably been others.
I meant serious autism.
Serious autism, no.
And for how long can a child fast? Like, is there a recommendation, or you would just let it go as well?
Yeah, I mean, children can typically fast for weeks, like adults. They go through the reserves more slowly, just like smaller adults do. I had a young man years ago. There was an event. One of my favorite events was a weekend event. It was called the Green Living Festival, something like that. No, it was called the Living Now Festival. The organization was called Green Living, but Living Now Festival was outside of Buffalo years ago, and I spoke there several years in a row. It was on a giant sculpture park. It's beautiful, rolling hills, spectacular. Everyone camped out. And one year I met this family there. It's a couple with 2 young kids. And probably 8 or 9 years later, the woman contacted me and said, I don't know if you remember me. I met you with my husband and 2 kids. Our son is now, Leland is now, I think he was 14. He'd probably been like 10 years. He's having all kinds of issues, and health issues and psychological issues, and we thought about you. We don't believe in medicine, and we thought maybe you could help. What do you think? And so he wound up coming with his mother, and he was 14, but he was tiny for his age. I mean, he looked like he was much younger. What was interesting was he's brilliant. I mean, he's a genius. I had a woman I knew who said, oh, I see you know Leland as well. I've been corresponding with him for 10 years, or for like 5 years, I think she said. Do you have any idea how old he is? It's like, yeah, he's 14. She'd been having a conversation with him since he was 9. She thought she was talking to an adult, because that's the way he's communicating at 9, right? But he fasted for 21 days, and today he's graduated from college. He's happy and healthy and having a great life, and everything shifted as a result of that.